Welcome to the Curated Craftsmen, a podcast where we'll learn about the hands, head, and heart behind creative entrepreneurs just like you. Kate Cook is the artistic drive behind Asphalt Canvas Custom Art and your host for this conversation about art, business, and belief.
Hey guys, today we are getting to know the hands, head, and heart behind Chris Dunlop, an automotive design and render artist. Chris attributes his artistic style using Sharpie markers, airbrushing techniques, and pinstriping to his beginning career as an automotive painter where he was officially dubbed Pinstripe Chris. After several years of creating artwork full-time and painting cars full-time, Chris and his wife Caitlin helped open up another body shop where they specialized in classic and exotic cars. During that time, Chris created the infamous Sharpie Mustang and the Sharpie Camaro, where he used only Sharpies to create an entire paint scheme for each car. He also started to offer custom-drawn renderings for their clients at the body shop to display potential paint schemes and build ideas. Eventually, Chris saw the demand for his artwork and made the leap to become a full-time artist. Although he's not classically trained in the arts, Chris believes his repairing cars and painting them full-time in the body shop early in his journey provided him a unique education and strong understanding of lighting and shapes. From his studio in Southern California, Chris now offers original automotive paintings featuring a variety of different brands, and his social media videos have garnered him over 800,000 followers on Instagram alone. We'd like to welcome Chris to the podcast. Thank you so much for joining us on the Curated Craftsmen podcast.
Well, first off, thank you so much for having me. I'm really excited to be able to chat with you. Even though artwork is what I do day to day, because primarily marketing actually happens through social media, that's actually like a huge part of what I do as well. Yeah. So between videoing, editing, and kind of the social media side of things, that literally does actually take up about half of the time. So I have my week divided into portions of how I'm going to work. So I spend the first part of the week working, second part of the week editing and doing the social media content side of things.
If anyone does not follow Chris already, he goes by Pinstripe Chris. His Instagram is what really drew me into his artwork. I also do like a scheduled marketing calendar, if you will, where it was like, where it's coordinated, where I have one day for social media, one day for website, blog, email stuff, and then the rest, client work. And then hopefully I can fit in like work for myself.
But yeah.
So in my research, I saw that you started out with a blog. Is that correct?
I would say probably at the earliest part. So that would have been like 2009, 2010.
Okay.
And that would have been right at the crossover where I was, because I used to paint actual cars for a living. So that would have been like the tail end of working in body shops, kind of crossing over into artwork.
Okay.
And really the reason for that, because if anybody's even old enough to remember that far back now, is because Facebook wasn't public yet. Instagram wasn't even thing. So it was as close to social media as you could get, where you could get a lot of people reading and looking at photos and videos. YouTube was even in its infancy then. So
yes.
A blog was like the easiest way to keep people up to date on stuff in real time. And I honestly found a fair amount of success with that early on. It didn't drop off until other social media platforms started to pick up.
Yes, I did see on a lot of your posts, you have like hundreds of comments on those blog posts, and they're very long form, which for my old-fashioned soul, I was so happy to read because I'm just so not like your TikTok personality.
Yeah, I get that. I think then when I was writing, I was a lot more just wrote what was on my mind. These days, I'm so careful about the things that I say, not necessarily because I have anything like bad to say. I treated it like a blog. I just kind of let whatever I was working on and whatever was going on in the shop just be a part of this very, very long-winded story, because this was really pre-video of any format. Nowadays in video, you can condense a lot of what happens in the shop day to day in a pretty good 1 minute bite. But if you were to type out the script of what that video is, it would look like a very long blog post essentially.
Yes. I know that there's a lot of creators out there, myself included, where when we transferred from blog to social media, and then in particularly more recently, social media became all video. Did you have a hard time with that transition?
Of all the other artists I've talked to trying to work into social media, I might have had one of the best experiences with it ever. Awesome. And it wasn't just because it was all glitz and glamour. It was really perspective. So to give you an idea, because it actually makes a great story. when I first moved to California and started doing artwork full time as opposed to working on cars when I was selling artwork, I would just started posting on Facebook because Instagram was only available if you had a smartphone, and I didn't have a smartphone at the time. And at that time, I got connected with Max Grundy, who you know.
Yes.
And he helped me do the first couple of shows I did. I would bend next to him or we'd share space. And obviously, he's like an artist that doesn't need any introduction. You already know that he's going to do great at a show, and he's got crazy good setup. And just what a super cool guy. Love his style, and just like a great family, amazing people. So he was willing to help me out and give me some space at a couple of shows, which really helped me. But what it really helped me realize was that there are a lot of artists, especially in the automotive space, that they do shows every weekend and they tour around the country. And coming from the production side of body and paint, I realized I was cranking out new pieces every day or every 2 days. And it actually benefited me more to stay at home and keep on painting versus going to a show and setting up. Because you have the cost of the booth, all the stuff that you brought with you, your hotel, time away from life. After a few shows, I was like, wow, I would rather try to throw into Facebook. And this was 12 years ago.
Wow.
So I decided I won't do any shows. I'm just going to throw into social media, and nobody else is doing social media really this way. Not a lot of artists, I should say, and let alone car artists, because it's such a, we think it's big because we're in it, but it's teeny tiny. It's really,
super
really
niche.
tiny.
Yeah, totally.
It's you, me, and the 10 other people. That's it in the whole world.
It's very true.
And they're all amazing people, but the world, that part isn't as big as we think it is. So we all know each other in one step or another. But not a lot of people are really jumping into social media yet. So I really just thought, if I can stay at home and be productive at the same time, I can post in real time while I'm working on something new or share the process of something. And I really, really, really leaned into that, and it worked out great. I was posting new drawings and sketches at least once a day for probably the first 5 or 6 years. And then that kind of stepped me into Instagram a little bit, maybe only a couple years later. And then like jumping ahead a million years, going into short format video, what I found was sort of funny about making that jump. I'd actually started on TikTok, and then I just moved back over to Instagram. I'm not on TikTok anymore. There's an account there, but I'm not active on it anymore. Mainly focused on Instagram and Facebook. But what I found was, while there was a lot of people that are like, man, this is really frustrating because, we're trying to sell artwork based on the photos of our artwork. That's obviously the truest representation. How do you get people interested in artwork by way of video, or even photography in way of video? And for me, it just set up a new challenge that I had to try and figure out. So I thought, even though I had to adapt to this, that's the way social media has always been. It's always changing under our feet, and the people that stay alive are the ones that are trying to keep up.
Do you ever find yourself creating for social media posts? Like
almost entirely. I will be completely honest. My
Wow.
life revolves around posting. Yeah. Yes, I'm pretty well wrapped up into it, which is why I consider it my primary leg of marketing. So it's unfortunate because I'll sketch something and I'll be just doodling and I'll be like, yeah, I wonder if this will make a good post, or if this is a good story, or you have to find like personal limits where you're like, all right, I'm gonna just draw this for me, or
It's a very hard line to draw because
Yeah.
if you don't have content that day and you're like, well, I just did this for me and it's not that great, but I like it.
Yeah.
It's like every day I'm like, well, shoot, maybe I should post this. And sometimes your most personal work, well, honestly, most times your most personal work is what resonates the most with people.
That's funny. I've had the opposite. Yeah.
Oh, really? That's interesting.
I find that the stuff that I love the most, people just kind of aren't really into, which I've learned to not take personal. It used to matter more than it does. Now I just go, yeah, maybe, especially when it comes to cars. At the core, you kind of go, maybe that's a car that I like that other people don't like. And that's okay. Hopefully the video is entertaining, even if they don't like the car. Where I found the most success with that, when the pandemic hit and all the shows dropped off of a cliff, everybody was suddenly jumping on social media trying to catch up. And I'd already established a ground game. I was done. So There's a lot of people playing catch up, which I can totally relate and understand. But sometimes when other people are seeing the game that I was playing, there's a lot of risk in leaning on social media, 100%. But then something comes along, a once in a lifetime thing, and you're like, what is our backup when your whole livelihood is based on the artwork that you sell? What's the thing that is really going to reach the most amount of people that you're capable of? Shows work until they stop working. Social media works until it stops working. But one is a result of time, effort, and strategy, and one like something like the pandemic happening, and then all the shows being done for like 2 or 3 years. That's crazy.
And honestly, I actually feel that way about social media because some people know that I had just reached that blue check mark number, and then all of a sudden my Instagram was deleted for no reason at all.
Whoa.
This has been like maybe 4 or 5 years ago now. It's not a big deal to me now, but at the time it was a big deal because I worked so hard to organically grow that number of followers.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden they said that there was they couldn't even tell me which post it was, but some post ended up, causing the copyright flag to come up. And they said that the artwork I was posting wasn't mine. And I had to send in all the social security number and
Oh
pictures
my
and all the
goodness.
things. And it kind of spooked me because I was
Yeah.
spending so much time. I just told you that I have my schedule of like, okay, I'm spending like this many days a month doing this social media thing, but it's not even my owned platform. I don't even have any say over what happens in the long run. So I actually feel that way that you kind of did about shows and during COVID time. It's like I kind of feel iffy about social media, especially right now,
Yeah.
because it can be taken away at any time.
Very easily. Yeah.
Yeah,
I
and
think
so
it's the correct perspective to have, honestly.
okay, well that's what do you have a backup plan for lack of better words
Nope.
for if some no you don't. Okay.
Nope, this is what I'm doing. I don't find any joy in backup plans. Plan B, I always use a quote from Will Smith. Always focus on plan A. If you have a plan B, then you're taking focus away from plan A.
Mm,
When it stops working, the next day I'm going to do something else. That's it. But yeah, to your point, all of social media is entirely out of our control. It's more of a lottery than anything else. So it does come down to strategy and how you know to play the game. As much as it may seem like it doesn't really matter what your follower count is. I've got posts that don't do well, and I've got posts that do well. Doesn't matter. The whole thing is a roller coaster ride. No matter
yeah.
where you're at in your journey, if you can accept that in the beginning, it makes it a lot easier down the road. You're going to
Yes.
have ups and downs. That's just the way it's going to be.
Not to talk about a backup plan, but do you have any sort of like an email list or anything, a way to like capture those people that are your followers on social media? So if something does happen,
Nope.
nope. Wow, that's amazing.
No. No, I prefer to keep things as simple as possible.
Oh, I admire you for that. I think that's really, really cool
It's,
because
yeah, I'm sure it's risky, but at the same time, there's a lot of different avenues where you can capture information, capture data, and kind of stay in touch with people. But
yes.
by the time we've squashed every hour in the week where I could have possibly been painting, I'd have rather been painting. So it's like, I don't want to hunt down people that are interested in my artwork. I want to put stuff out there and I want someone to find it, love it, and want to get it. I don't want to be knocking on everybody's door, trying to convince them they should buy this. So I hope that people see what I do and enjoy the videos and like the artwork. Whether they buy it or not, I'm stoked that people watch the videos. That means the world to me. But in terms of these other segmented ways of getting people's interest, no, honestly, if Instagram crashed tomorrow and then there was some new app, there's like this weird joy in like starting fresh and trying to build again. Sounds fun. The artwork will still be the same. I already know how to do the artwork. Now it's just how do you do the social media side?
That's so true. It just becomes a new challenge. That perspective is really beautiful. And I can really see that kind of like simplicity in your overall brand. Your website's very clean. Your artwork is made very clean, which I know sounds
Thanks.
weird, but like there was a blog post I read where you were like, I prefer using pen to sketch out skeleton sketches because it's a lot cleaner than like a pencil
Way
sketch,
cleaner.
which is so true. A lot of the podcast conversations I've had so far have been with older people, and not to discredit their success, but they have,
Of course not.
The social media aspect wasn't really there. And it's been something that I think a lot of people have been frustrated with recently. And so to hear you just freaking do it and don't put so much effort in trying to collect the followers, even for myself, it's good to hear because I overthink things and I'm not as simplistic as that. And it really is as simple as the people that like your art will follow you. Like the market will tell you if the artwork is good or not, really.
What's beautiful about social media is that done in a really simple strategy, it can all happen very organically and very smoothly. When people opt in for you to say have their email address, that's good because they're opting in. But if you're getting in touch with people that say following you, and I'm just making up an example off the top of my head, we don't live in that kind of world anymore where people really want, like we want that type of connection, but it can start to feel invasive in a way. Somebody opening up Instagram and seeing you and I post, that is the level of commitment that people want. People may not want an email from me directly. I don't know if that's true or not, but I just try to create, again, like the simplest formula for point A, point B to me. My goal is to do good artwork and make that the swan song to the whole process. It shouldn't be, well, hopefully the videos are good and hopefully all that stuff is going well. But yeah, again, if I'm spending a lot of time knocking on doors, probably means there's something else in my process that needs work. Maybe I'm not doing my best artwork at that stage, or maybe I think this happens a lot, especially on social media, especially amongst artists. If you find that you're seeking people more than people are finding you, you might not be appealing to the correct audience yet.
It sounds like you have a really great understanding of your audience.
At least of social media in general. I like
Well,
down to a
yeah.
science. It's insane.
Well, and culture. I think a lot, I myself included, I kind of forget because I am such an old soul. Like I still write letters to people, which
Oh,
isn't
that's
like,
amazing.
yeah, like I love that. I think it's so special to have a handwritten letter
Yeah.
from somebody. And you're right. They want that, but there's a missing link there where they want that, but the attention span is not allowing it, or their busy schedule doesn't allow it.
We do need to grab people's attention in a meaningful way, but
Yes.
not like grasp onto it too tightly because
Yes.
you can make yourself seem like a desperate artist in that attempt. We want people to get us to know us at the level that we decide through social media.
Hmm.
And that's where you can kind of decide your barriers as well. I don't post a lot of personal stuff on social media or me going out in the world. I specifically keep my social media entirely focused on artwork because that's my
Yes.
goal.
Would you share like how your week actually it looks? Could you share that for people? I'm just thinking of like somebody that's just maybe getting started or having a tough
Yeah.
time.
I'll start this with a caveat. This is what I do, and it probably would not work for anybody else. So don't take this as I should try this. There might be good, valuable things in it, but there's
Yes.
probably, if you were to read current Instagram strategy, a lot of what I do is completely against the grain, but it works for me. I don't worry
Yes.
about anything except what the data says, of which I'm completely strategic. So Monday, I call my gradient day. I kind of drop artwork off with the framers, answer emails, and prep a canvas. And maybe if I'm lucky, I'll get line work down on a canvas on Monday. So that's why I
Okay.
call it a gradient day. I spent the first half of the day kind of getting all the things out of the way for the week that will prohibit me from painting at any other point because I don't want any distractions. By the time I start into painting, that's all I'm working on until it's done. So maybe if I'm lucky, I've got a sketch on canvas Monday. I spend Tuesday and Wednesday painting. If I need final touch-ups on Thursday, maybe a little bit into Thursday, but Tuesday, Wednesday are my main paint days. And then Thursday is my editing day. And then Friday is my posting day. I post once a week. That's why I say I don't think that any other strategist would recommend this. I only post once a week.
So I used to post Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and now I'm thinking
Whoa.
about posting Monday, Friday. I
Yeah.
used to post 5 days a week, and
Same.
that's what built my. I really do believe that's what built my initial following. I really think that, and I used to post at the same time. I would post this in the similar category. Like Mondays would be Jeep Day, Tuesday. I'd have like
That's
brand
smart.
categories
Yeah.
basically.
Same here.
Yeah. Okay. Really. Okay. So yeah,
Yeah.
that's
So I
how I kind
truck
of built
Tuesday,
it.
Ferrari Friday,
Yes.
Wing Wednesday. Yeah. So that is that kind of comes off of what we were talking about earlier.
Yeah.
So Instagram and the people on it have completely changed. What worked then does not work. If you split down to the real crazy science of Instagram, figure every quarter at least there's major changes on the platform, if not weekly, minute
Oh, for
changes.
sure.
I think if you're posting too frequently, you actually can alienate people more than if you post less. So my goal, once I figured out a formula for video where I was doing the entire painting in one video, at the time I thought was kind of a crazy idea because I didn't think the way that I paint looks so horrible for the first half of the painting. I thought no one's going to take me seriously after they see this. What
Yeah.
I didn't realize was that was actually an amazing hook because the
Yes.
artwork looks terrible in the beginning, but it looks really cool in the end, I hope. So I just decided to lean into that. But what I found was it wasn't realistic for me to produce more than one or two of those a week and maintain quality. So I was like, you know what? I'm going to focus on making sure the paintings are the best they can be because no matter how good the video is, if the video gets one view and that one person buys the painting, that's all I need. So if the painting isn't good at its core, it doesn't really matter how good the video performs. Somebody is physically going to buy this. So I need it to be the best it can be. So I need the time to produce a good painting and also the bandwidth to be able to film it and edit it in a reasonable amount of time to try to check all those boxes. Sometimes there's pluses and minuses. Sometimes I end up with 3 days instead of two. Sometimes it's 1 day instead of two. And sometimes I'll start on a painting and have to start on it and restart it 2 or 3 times before it really starts to become what it's going to be. I still make plenty of mistakes all the time.
Yeah. Well, I was going to
Yeah,
ask you what, you keep saying like if it's a good painting, it will sell. And I was
sure.
wondering, what makes a good painting in your opinion for yourself?
Well, it's definitely an opinion because I don't know. Every week I'm proven right and wrong about
I know
what
what you
people
mean.
react to. Because a good video doesn't mean good
Mhm.
artwork. Good artwork doesn't mean a good video. They don't mean the same thing. And if you can't get somebody, in the case of the way that I do videos where the reveal is at the end, if I can't get you all the way to the end, then you haven't seen what the painting looks like anyways.
Yes.
So there is some magic in creating a dynamic video to hopefully get there. It's tricky because you have to balance what you're looking at data-wise, from at least from my point of view, on social media. You have to balance a little bit data-wise what you see as far as response, interaction, and views. But you can't let that dictate how you look at your own artwork, because if a post does good, that doesn't, or does bad, doesn't mean you're a bad artist. That's ridiculous. It just means that maybe you didn't win the views lottery that day. It happens. It happens to everybody. So you can't be so hard on yourself about that. Like today, I posted a BMW. If I put one BMW and it does amazing, I can't do 100 BMWs from here on out. That's a bad way to look at the data, because now you're giving people too much of what you think they want. I personally try to alternate. If I'm going to do a specific brand, I try to go to a different brand next week, a different brand next week, a different brand. Even if I, say Porsche is every other or every three, because, there's cars that I like. Yes. I want to do them frequently, but if I do a ton of them back to back, I'm just as likely to lose the portion of my audience that isn't interested in those cars. Yeah. So some variety on its whole. I think there's a quality level in the artwork where I go, this is good. I'm stoked on this. I hope people like the video. That's the most I can do. If nobody buys this, that's a bummer, but I can still be stoked that the artwork came out good. But it doesn't matter, because say Friday, today I posted a new video. It'll run through the weekend. Monday, I started a new painting. I'll have forgotten what I painted this week by the time I start on the next painting.
It's cool because you don't really meet artists that are like numbers and stats driven. And also true. Like, it's hard. It's hard because a lot of artists, I think, are more like heart driven than head driven.
It's not a bad thing, but if you're, I think all artists want to know how they can succeed on social media. Yes. And it's not that you have to subtract your personality or your love for what you do. You have to use that as a piece and mix that with the data. Because something I said on a previous podcast to another artist was, I only show people the things that I want them to ask me to do. If I'm posting Ferraris and Porsches, it's because that's what I want people to ask me to do. In that same way, if I start posting like really crappy cars that I don't really love, and somebody loves it, and I start getting all these requests for stuff that I don't love, I can't bring myself to do that artwork because I don't have the same love for it. Yes. So as an artist, you should, exactly, because that's where you're going to do your best work. So as an artist, you really should pay attention to the data, but not subtract yourself from it. You kind of go, okay, where does this align with where I'm at? Or if people are really liking this thing and it's a fluke, then just decide to put that in a box and set it aside. Go, listen, I'm not going to be the person that does that kind of gimmicky stuff. Let's try again. Let's do something else. You can very easily accidentally build an audience around something that you actually don't want to do.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Me and Bo Monster were talking about that. He's like, man, I could make a house payment painting pet portraits, but do I want to be painting 100%. Pet portraits?
Yeah, I was telling the last guy podcast the same thing. If I wanted to be a multi-millionaire, I would just paint pet portraits, because it's the same reason I don't do like portraits of people's grandmothers. I just can't bring myself to, I'm sure I could do a good job of it, but it's not where my heart is, Did you start your career as a commission artist where somebody was coming to you with an idea, or did you start your career as, these are all my paintings, do you like them? Like, these are what I painted from my heart. I've always had a really delicate mix, and I'm really, really careful with commissions now. I don't often do commissions. So thankfully, because of social media, what that allowed is, here's something new that I have for available every day at the beginning. Yeah. Sketches or pen and ink drawings. So that for people actually makes a very easy transaction. The communication's minimal, here's the price, and they either like or they don't. So most of what I do is paintings that I make and sell outright. Okay. The good news about social media, especially video, say a painting doesn't sell, it's not a total loss, because the video still doubles as the marketing for somebody that goes, hey, I saw that video and it got me interested in asking you. So potential all the time with videos for people to ask you about stuff. But you have to decide your limits. And that's kind of the thing that I've always kind of had, like, try to find a balance with, because I have the space to say yes to everything. And the way that I phrase the way I do commissions now essentially is, I need complete creative freedom. It'll be your car. It'll be exactly what you want. But if I'm not going to have fun with it, it's going to show in the artwork. And I'm not interested in that. I literally don't need to say yes to any more artwork ever. So if I'm going to say yes to something, I want it to be fun, because I want to have fun with it and I want to over deliver for that person.
It's very easy for somebody to go to your Pinterest or your website or your socials and see exactly, you can see how it's going to turn out. You have a very strong artistic style, and I'm sure that was built over time.
Does mean that there is like a trust, that
Yeah.
somebody really does have to trust you. And I can totally
Yes.
appreciate that. But, as a lot of artists, especially coming from the automotive industry, but I think almost any artist can relate to this anyways,
Yes.
you get burned by enough people and you really start to close off. You go, listen, I don't want to do this for anybody unless you're super cool and it's something that I want to be stoked on. So, because
Yes.
people do, being an artist is not an easy thing to do from the
No.
business standpoint, communicating with people and getting deposits and having them hold up their end just as well. So it can kind of work hard in you a little bit over time where you get a little bit, not like cynical, but you learn to be a lot more careful about what you agree to
Yes,
because you don't
definitely.
want it to sap the joy out of what you do.
Yes, and it easily can. I remember when I
Again,
first opened, I started as just a primarily commission artist. I didn't have any of my own artwork, and I was working in like three different mediums, and
oh, wow.
I burnt out hard the second year in. I was toast. Like I made money, but I was toast, and I finally like kind of had a come to Jesus moment where I had to, pick a medium, pick my sizes, pick the schedule. Like I had to really like put some borders on what I was going to be. It couldn't just be this artistic free for all,
Of
if you
course.
will. I don't know. It's weird. It's just it's a learning curve for sure when you first start. And for me, I wanted like I'm always like everything in the kitchen sink. So I didn't want to say no to anybody. There was a lot of cool opportunities coming at me, and
Yeah.
it was hard, and it still is even for me to this day is to say no to certain opportunities. But I think from your story, just what you've told me here recently, it's like you have this overarching understanding of what you want your brand to be. So let's
Yeah.
get into a little bit of your story as far as how you got into being an artist, because you kind of just talked about you're in this weird little niche area of automotive art.
I started as a painter's helper in a collision shop. So I started as low in the totem pole as you could go, which was great. I didn't realize it at the time that that was a great way to build upwards from. And fortunately, a couple of the painters that I work with, one guy suggested I try airbrushing, and down the road, some guy suggested I try pinstriping. And later, those things led into me doing both of those things full time. And like just long journey that helped me with even what I do now. Obviously, will do a ton of airbrushing. I use a lot of pinstripe techniques in the artwork. So almost everything that I did in the collision world and custom paint world translated in such a great way into the way that I paint now. So even as hardship as that journey was, or felt like, I had to be really, really grateful for all the people that like didn't even realize they were helping me along the way.
Your willingness to help somebody, even in like the smallest way, you may not even realize how
Yeah.
massive of a deal it's going to be in the future. Like I have people like that in my story too, that it's unbelievable. If you just pursue your passion and be kind along the way, how many people you can help without even really realizing it.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So in that time that you were working at this first body shop, did you meet your wife then, or when did you
That's actually
meet your
when we
wife?
met. Yeah. Yeah. It was actually really funny. We met when I was working at the first body shop, and this was back in Maryland, where we're from. And then we parted ways because she went to an art school and I moved to St. Louis, Missouri, and I was continuing doing body and paint
Okay.
at other shops there. I was just kind of moving along in the journey. I was just ready not to be in Maryland. But what was so funny and just definitely kind of ages us a little bit is because we reconnected on MySpace. And then I moved back to Maryland, and then we got back together, and we've been together ever since. By the
Okay.
time that I got back to Maryland, it was still a couple years after that before I met a guy that we had a shop together where we were primarily working on Ferraris at the time.
Okay.
So thankfully, I get again to work with another much older guy who already had the space that kind of gave me the space to come in and gave me access to working on cars that were just kind of dreamed about at the time. So it was really kind of a special thing. Whether he was doing it on purpose or not, we're sharing a lot of insight into what owning a body shop, the cost of things. So it really kind of dawned on me that it was not a very lucrative way moving forward. Every child wants to like, I want to do custom paint and shoot flames and do all this stuff. And that's great. It's not like it's a bad living at all. It's
Oh,
plenty
no.
good. It's just the reality of, say, shop, insurance, electricity, gas, materials. You just kind of go, maybe that's not where I want to go. Maybe there's something else. Maybe there's something bigger. So it was really good to do that. I think we worked together for about a year or so before we moved out to California. And I just thought that was cool to see from that perspective because it gave me a different respect for not only shop owners, there's just this hierarchy tier system for what people that have like a huge staff have to do in terms of cost and insurance and all these other things. And I just thought, I just don't think that's for me. I don't mean to to discredit anybody that does that for a living. It's a really cool job. That was when I realized that aspect wasn't going to be what I wanted to do moving forward.
Yes.
So when we got to California, I was still doing a little bit of like side jobs here, just in body shops. When we got here, I just had a 3-ring folder. I was going around to paint shops and showing my airbrushing, pinstriping, just kind of like, look at me, I can show you what I can do. Call me if you ever need anything. So I just ran around to body shops when we first got here to introduce myself. But that was when I started doing build renderings for shops. It didn't occur to me until I got here and I met Chip Foose and Steve Stanford. I was like, oh, there's like a whole industry around just drawing concept cars. I didn't even realize that was a thing until I moved to California. So that was most of what I did for such a long time before I got into paintings, because it's like, oh, this is work that people want that I can get paid for, which is cool. That comes with its own set of challenges that it also turns out that I wasn't necessarily a good fit for. I was at times not a very easy person to work with. But I didn't know then that what the conflict there was. I wanted to do stuff that was creative in a different way, and these people were looking to achieve a specific goal. Yes. And I thought the car and the artwork part is where those overlapped, and they did. But then I was like, oh, I think what I want to do is more over here. I need to keep going. Like, maybe this isn't where my journey ends. Maybe this is where this part of the journey ends, and we go on to the next thing.
Yes, and that's kind of why I brought up the commission thing, because I knew you were doing that for other people, and I was thinking, I cannot imagine how specific you would have to be to do that for a living. I've always admired Chip Foose, and obviously when I was a little girl, we would watch like Overhauling and stuff.
Yeah, of course.
That was like my favorite show in the whole world, because it was the only thing I saw where you could combine the two things.
Same.
Because even when I'm painting somebody's car into an illustrative scene, they're pretty easy to work with. They're like, as long as it has like a general look, this is kind of they're not very specific. But when you're wanting to actually build a piece of metal that looks exactly like a drawing, I can imagine it was very challenging to work with some people.
Well, again, sometimes I was the person that was the difficult one. So I don't want to throw shade on anybody. I realize it's
for sure. I get that.
Yeah, but you're not wrong. I think that is where the complication started to land for me, because there was a huge level of specificity, and there's an amount of it that I loved, because I grew up around like classic Chevys, Buicks, and Cadillacs. So they're vehicles that I know really, really well. So if we're doing concept artwork for those vehicles, I can just shoot from the hip, and that's great. But once we got into more contemporary stuff, it's not that I lost interest. It just felt like, you're not really giving me anything to do anymore. Now I'm just a person. If these people could just take my hand and move it, they probably would. So it's like, well, I think what I want to do is not that. The part of me that made that departure easy, where I'm going to just throw into paintings full time. Yes. 2 things. One, I know that there was some young kid out there, just like me 10 years earlier, that would have loved all the opportunities that I was getting. I think it's just as important to step aside and go, you know what? The people that really want this job should get it. If I'm doing it half-heartedly, the customer's getting probably not the best as they can get, but they would rather work with somebody that's more enthusiastic about the job. So there's always young artists coming up that would love any opportunity that you think that is like, I'm not really interested in this. There's somebody out there that is. So I thought it'd be good for me to just kind of let some other artists enjoy this part of their journey. And the other side of that was, at the time, I was split between doing concept renderings and paintings. And I found that as a risk that I needed to take, I thought people aren't really taking my artwork seriously because they see me divided on this other side of work. When people see that you're really committed to one thing, again, show people what you want them to ask for. When I was even sharing renderings occasionally, that's still the majority of what I get asked for, which was fine when I was doing it full time. But by the time I was ready to make a switch, I went, okay, I can maybe keep doing these for the shops that I work with, like on a personal level, but I can't share them anymore, because I need people to stop asking me to do these. I'll keep working with the guys that I've been with for a long time, but I need people to stop asking me and see that this is where I'm trying to go.
Yeah, you have to take the lead.
Well, I think we also all know that comes with a huge amount of risk, no matter which way you look at it. What happens if, a million people don't like the thing that I want to do next? That is scary. At the core, you're like, well, if I'm not really truly me, then what is any of this worth? I can't pretend to be somebody else that I'm not.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I want to go back to where you were saying that you felt like the customer might as well have grabbed your hand and like do the thing yourself.
I say that not begrudgingly. I hope that anybody I've ever worked with doesn't feel like that's true. I'm just framing that as I knew when I was done with that side of work.
Oh, totally. What are your thoughts on artificial intelligence and AI artwork?
I don't have like a deep feeling of it one way or another. I'm pretty passive about stuff. There's an amount of it that I think is a fad, to be perfectly honest. Once enough of it's out there, I think we've already seen the peak. I think the average artist, especially if you're a car artist, I think you can tell when somebody's posting AI art personally. I see the utility in it. I don't see where it's going to do anything for me personally.
Yeah.
Because I'm such a traditionalist. I actually really enjoy digital artwork, but once you've removed the human element out of it, I can see the usefulness in it for sure. But I think as car people, when you talk to somebody that's like, I really want a stupid old car that I have to shift with 3 pedals and a gear shift, you understand your audience wants the most authentic, hand-drawn thing possible. Why would AI help that process at all?
That's so true.
I think it's trendy. I don't think it's going away. Like I said, I do think that it's useful. I just don't see where it's going to become useful for me personally.
Yeah.
It just doesn't land, you know?
Yeah.
So I don't think AI is evil. I'm not worried about it. Taking over the art world, I think when digital artwork started to become really, really big, I got really worried about what I was doing. What I didn't realize on the other end is it actually seemed to change the value of what I was doing, because now there's a smaller amount of artists that want to struggle with a paintbrush and an airbrush and I think that's great. That makes what we do not like more expensive or more valuable. It makes it more unique, I guess is a better way to say it. Because I don't think there's anything wrong with digital artwork. I love the tools and I think it's amazing. And they're not necessarily the same category. So they occupy the art space, but you kind of go, oh, that's cool that this one was done that way. That's cool that this one was done this way. They're just different is all. We can't predict the future, so who knows? Maybe there's an answer out there that we haven't come up with yet. And that's exciting too. I'll be here for that too. I don't think AI changes what especially automotive artists are doing. Not that I think there's anything wrong with AI art. I think the real problem with it, especially, I think in many forms of art, but I see this with automotive artists too, unfortunately. When you don't disclose what it is, but it's kind of obvious what it is, as long as you're honest about it, I don't think it's a big deal.
I was thinking about AI art because my print shop is actually printing AI generated artwork for some Austin artists that are selling it. That's their livelihood, which is insane. Nice. Like I walked in, and it's this huge G-clay print of this thing. It was like a monster or something. And I was like, wow, what a cool piece of artwork. And the guy was like, yeah, it's AI generated. And I was, what? People are selling prints with AI artwork? That's insane to me. But you're right. It is its own category.
It is.
And that's how we're just going to all have to look at it. And I think it will naturally become that as well, like you said. On your website, I saw that you do in-house printing. I've always been so intrigued with when you post a painting, you say prints available today or prints will be available tomorrow. And I'm like,
sure.
How is this possible? So would you mind sharing your print process, how you came up with it and what's your protocol for how to make prints and things like that?
Well, so there's 2 parts to that answer. One is that we don't do prints anymore.
Oh, okay.
At all. I haven't for 2 years. I only sell originals. I found that because I'm a car person, I think a lot of car people are like, I'm an automotive painter. I'm so picky about everything. Prints turned out to be no exception. Try to work with a local print shop and they would do the most amazing job, but I would have an original here and a print here and I'd be like, can we get the reds to be a little less magenta? They're doing the best that they can. And it became unrealistic to do this back and forth. So I got really comfortable doing the color correcting myself. And I was like, you know what? I'm just going to get a medium format printer and we'll just, it's basically print on demand when you have all the stuff in your own place.
Yes.
I don't have to inventory anything except ink, paper, and the machine. As long as you're competent with Photoshop and a camera to make sure you're getting the best. So I could run my own samples. So I knew where the colors were going to land, at least ballpark. And that meant that instead of running 100 of something and crossing my fingers, I could print them as needed, dry them as needed, ship as needed.
Wow.
So at the peak, that was a lot of what I was doing. And it sort of frustrated me because I was spending more time on prints than originals, which was part of my shift at the end. I went, you know what? Yeah, this is kind of a personal insight, but I'll share it, especially because I'm sure a lot of artists were more likely to listen to this type of thing. Part of why I stopped offering prints is because it created a path of least resistance for people to buy the least expensive thing that I offered.
Yes, I have had that issue.
It sounds really selfish to say that out loud, but I wouldn't be where I'm at in my journey if I wasn't honest about every step. It's not that I don't want to create an access point for people to be able to get stuff, but my goal is to do amazing paintings. That's what I want to do. I like the idea of prints, but honestly, things really started to work more seriously for me once I stopped offering prints at all. It made originals more exclusive. It made people take my pricing more seriously. I
Yes.
don't know that that strategy will work for everybody because it's kind of bold. I don't sell 100% of the paintings I do. I sell a lot of them, but it also means that when I paint something for somebody, they're going to have the only version of it that exists ever. And that's especially amongst car people. Usually it's something very personal. And honestly, I found that when I was trying to get taken seriously for the prices of the paintings at the time were a fraction of what I charge now. What I learned is it doesn't matter if you tell people $100, $500, you're too expensive for 90% of the people.
Yes.
And instead of trying to pander to everybody that wants to spend $40, I would rather put all my effort into that one person that wants to spend $10,000. Now, it can take some time to find that person or to get to build the confidence to build that system. And I'm exaggerating with these numbers, by the way. I'm just saying as a as an example, selling a lot of inexpensive things at volume doesn't satisfy me as an artist. And financially, it's worked better for me to focus on doing the best paintings I can do, because at the end of the day, someone is paying not a small amount of money to get something really specific and nice. And I want to spend all my time making sure that is the best that it can be, framed, shipped, as safe as it can be, beautiful, fix any problems that there are along the way, keep communication with everybody. Because the other thing is with prints, I'm sure a lot of people have just managed to do this better than I have. It just didn't suit my personality. If 2 out of 10 prints got damaged, by the time we reran them and resent them, we've lost money. And I'm the one keeping track of inventory of ink and paper. And I just thought, I'm spending so much time doing prints, and it's equating to this, it's not like it did make money, but I just thought for the amount of time that it was taking and the effort, it took away from the thing that I really wanted to do, which was painting. My job. I'm a painter. I want to paint. So yeah, I just decided to take the risk and kind of go, we're not getting prints anymore. Just going to focus on originals. I hope people that want these find them. And it's worked out, honestly, because when you take that risk and you take that leap, people do eventually find you. You do have to go through that spot, that transition area of crossing your fingers and just kind of hoping. But I think if you're doing your best work and putting it forward, you're always going to find the right people.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that and being kind of vulnerable there, because I think that's going to help a lot of people.
I realize it comes across as a little bit capitalistic to be like, no, I don't want to sell small items. I only want to focus on big items. I realize how that sounds all the time.
No. You're trading time for money.
Always.
You're always, no matter what job you're doing, but especially as an entrepreneur and especially as an artist, you're trading time for money. It's logical to work smarter and not harder.
Yeah. And I do think that there are other artists, even in our same space, that have created a better formula around that than I have. I just realized what my limits were, and I went, okay, this doesn't suit me. I hear the people out there going, oh, you could do print on demand, and we tried that, and the same problem persisted. It was path of least resistance. We couldn't get people interested in originals if we were offering something for less.
The quality concept of being a perfectionist, and especially with print on demand, man, that is always in the back of my head. People are always saying print on demand, print on demand. My husband is like the print on demand king with his business, but he just does
works.
There's certain businesses where it's like seamless, it works beautiful, but for fine art, it's like it's very, very challenging to find, if at all, find a company that can suit your vision, and because what you're putting out is your reputation
100% of the time. I
fully believe that. Like even down to t-shirts and stuff. It's like I went through like 3 different t-shirt shops just to get. I only have one t-shirt for my whole shop that I wear and that I sell, and it took me forever to find somebody to print them. Actually silk screen the back.
Yeah, and I think also you have to look at all answers dynamically. I don't know what next year brings or the year after that.
100%.
If there's a new path forward where that works, I'm stoked. The thing, especially with prints, because we did prints in-house for, I want to say, almost 10 years.
Wow.
It's a long time. And then we did a couple of print on demands. But the space in between was always, so we stopped doing prints and then we did print in demand a couple different times. And each time it was probably about a year in between.
Wow.
So that we can give a lull spot and then go, you know what, let's try it again and see what happens. Let's try it again and see what happens. Because your following count is always changing, and expectations of followers is always changing. I don't know what the future holds yet. So I don't have the answer. All I can say is right now, my focus is just on originals because that's what I want people to see and be interested in.
Yeah, super
Also,
smart.
It's really hard to make video content around prints.
It's nearly impossible. 2 things. I think a through thread with your story so far is that you're wanting to put out the best product, and if you can't do that in a certain time frame, you're going to minimize whatever you can so that the best product comes out on Friday. Like whether it's the video, it's the artwork, it's the prints, like you're not going to overextend yourself. And if you do, you always pull yourself back and say like, this is not working for me. How can I dial down or dial up certain areas of the business so that I get the best quality, everything.
I think it's also really important to do every month or every 2 months to really do a check-in with where you're at and make sure it's the direction you want to go. Because you can always switch gears, but if you're not honest with yourself about where you're at or you're overreactive, it could be the opposite effect. Because you don't want to wait until you're miserable to make a decision because you'll make an overly dramatic decision. So a regular check-in. So I journal not every day, but every few days. Great to go back to a year ago and go, I feel like this week sucks, but compared to last year, actually, this week's pretty amazing. Maybe I should just be more grateful.
That's such a great tip. And I also journal every day. More specifically, I even write down prayers, and I'm able to go back and see, like, did this, all these things I was asking for or worried about came true or they didn't happen. It has helped my faith, strengthen my faith, not just in God, but also in myself. So when you took the jump from doing like the body work and the car painting, and how was that transition?
So coming from the paint and body side is, especially 12 years ago, is a little bit different than it was now. So having been in that part of the industry for, I think, about 8 years at that point, I had never known if I was ever going to get paid that week. Not ever.
Oh.
I never knew if I was going to get paid. And that's whether I was full-time painter or a body person or just a helper in a shop. I think the first shop that I worked at, the collision shop, that was a normal shop that I got paid weekly. Every shop since, every custom shop, every hot rod shop was, there's a tier system. How long have you been here? We didn't actually make any money or we're robbing people. In the case of some awful shops that I worked at, there's a story that plenty of people in the industry have heard a million times before. I'm not unique in this way.
Yeah.
The difference was I decided to pull the plug. I was like, well, this is insane. So the last shop that I worked at was in Huntington Beach. And it was the only shop I worked at when we moved to California, just to kind of make the transition into artwork. And it was my first experience with a SEMA build. So that meant there was a couple of stretches of days where we would do like 48 or 50 hours straight with no sleep, which compared to some other shops I've worked at wasn't really that unusual. It didn't suck, but the shop owner just said, keep track of your hours. I got you guys. It's just important. This build is going to be really important for us. Got the truck done in time for the show. They had passes for everyone to go to SEMA except me. So they were like, go home, sleep, rest, which is great because I was really tired. I was stoked, and I was just going to spend the next few days at the beach anyways. And I'd never heard of SEMA. Coming from the East Coast, never heard of it. So I was like, wow, okay, people do this every year? This is kind of insane, but whatever. And later it just became a huge part of life and business. But anyways, so it's like the following Monday, and everyone's kind of getting back to it. And that is when everybody was expecting to get paid. And so the shop owner, he just said, hey, I had to cut this guy a check and we're waiting from the sponsor. So tell you what, if you just go ahead and keep working, I know that I'll be able to get you caught up. And I had already been through this like a half a dozen times with other shops I've worked at all over the United States. That was the point where I was like, yeah, no, I'll come back when you have the check for me. I'm not going to keep working for you. That's really stupid. Yeah, I would be the crazy person if I said, you owe me a lot of money for all the time that I spent. And again, I'm saying this story feeling like I'm special. A lot of people can relate to this that work in the custom car industry. This is not specific to me at all. The only difference is I decided to not work there. I was like, okay, well, call me when you've got a check for me. And I said, once we're paid, I'll come back to work. I like working with these guys. It was a cool shop. The next day, I started posting drawings on Facebook. It was seamless for me. I was like, I don't know when this guy's going to call me. I'm not going to sit on the couch and wait. I'm just going to start. That moment, you kind of go, now I have control of 100% of my time until somebody calls me. I'm not going to wait till they call me. I'm going to do what I want to do. And maybe one day they'll call me. Obviously, he never called.
Wow, he never called.
No.
Wow, well, he's lost.
Well, that shop is long gone. The great part is I had $0. So the thing is, and it wasn't like rock bottom life or anything. I love being here, even with $0. I thought, well, cool. That means that I am 100% control of what I earn from here forward. I don't owe anybody anything. I had a cheap old Volkswagen Bug that cost $0. Rent was reasonable. It's like, if I work from my apartment, which I was at the time, I was like, okay, so my overhead is my apartment, and that's it.
Yes.
So it was like, as long as I can make this, and I think at that time I was doing drawings for like $50, but I could do one a day, 5 days a week. The challenge is, how do you make the transition from the full-time job that you're comfortable with to the freedom and artwork that you really want to do? And what I found, and maybe it's just my personality type, I've not met many people that made this work, that there really isn't space for both. You either have to decide that you're going to have fun and do creative stuff as a hobby in your free time, and there's nothing wrong with that. Or you have to quit your job and decide you're going to throw in to this creative endeavor and see what happens. Because in life, they're really, like, we all have the same 24 hours in a day. Can you really go and do a job for 10, 12 hours and still have enthusiasm when you get home to put another 6, 8 hours into something? Eventually something's going to give. You're going to get terrible at both your jobs.
Yes, I was doing that for a while with a full-time job and then coming home and working. And I think there's a time for that for a very short season. But once you start realizing, once you start realizing like, okay, this could be a thing, and you're not going to fully realize it. That's what's crazy. You're never going to know. And so you just have to take that leap.
Funny thing is, everybody that transitions from a career, an established career, into doing artwork full-time, you do know you have an entire career that you're leaving, that if nothing works, Absolutely. You can always find a job.
You can always go back. Do you have a project? I like to always ask this, but do you have a project that tested your abilities?
I'm thinking of an art car that I've just recently did and I'm getting ready to do version 2 of. And maybe it's just because it's the most fresh in my mind. It's not like it pushed me especially hard. It's just there were a lot of points in it that I could have just said, nah, I'm good.
Yeah.
But I decided to push forward. So just 2 weeks ago, I just did the first version of this art car. I've been communicating with, they're like a car curation company in Singapore. And they originally wanted to fly me out there to do the art car.
And before we get into the story, for people that don't know what art cars are, can you explain that really quickly, like what an art car is?
There's a lot of different versions of it. So there's like no right, wrong. But essentially, if you can imagine a car, like a physical car, is the canvas of which you are going to paint onto. But I think there's a division between, say, a well-crafted custom paint job with airbrushing and pinstriping versus an art car. They kind of have an overlap space, but they are also individualistic on their own. I tend to think of an art car as you hire an artist to kind of paint it like a canvas, treat it. You almost have to see one and then you go, art car versus custom paint job. Because I think there's more forgiveness in an art car to leave all the human touches in it. Where when you do a custom paint job, you go, I want this to be as flawless as possible, as perfect as it can be, just to create that high level look. But in an art car, I think the human, the brush strokes showing through, the line weight variations, I think those are all cues that validate what it is.
I think that's a great description of it. So this company in Singapore,
they
reached out to you.
Last October to do this art car. And they originally wanted to do it in Singapore, which would have been super cool. But we realized some of the logistics for materials were going to be a bit challenging. And the car was going to debut in Monterey Car Week. So eventually they came to the agreement that they would ship the car here. And so the original version of doing marker artwork on the whole car, but also prepping the car, disassembling, and final clear coating it in the process of doing the art car. So it could be a finished cleared paint job. When it became apparent that the car wasn't going to arrive with enough time to do all of that, so say we're 2 weeks out from Monterey Car Week and we're getting the update, the car's on the boat, but it's not here yet. I suggested something sort of crazy that I don't think many artists would do, but I was like, with some caveats here, I said, tell you what, I'll do the car twice. I'll prep the car, clean the surface, and I'll do marker artwork on top of the car. And so that you guys can go to the show with a completely covered car and then bring it back. I'll clean the artwork off and then we'll go and do version 2. So I said, I'll do it twice.
That's so much work.
And each version will be different, which is exciting. Obviously, I didn't say I would do it for free. So I was very fair, believe me, because I love working with these guys. Everybody was amazing. But I said, I think this is the best way to check a bunch of boxes. You get to take an art car up there. It won't be finished, it won't be clear coated. But we'll do that on the second version so that there's enough time to do it right. Everybody that I brought on to work with me has space to breathe. We're not racing to get to a show. So skip ahead a couple of weeks. The car arrives Friday and they're leaving Sunday of 2 weeks ago. I tend not to think too much about these jobs ahead of time because I kind of already know how they're going to go as far as artwork. For the duration of almost a year of talking with people, telling them about the job, they're like, aren't you worried, aren't you? I'm like, it doesn't even matter until the car arrives. There's no reason to get excited because I don't know where it is in the world. When it gets here, I'll set the pace for what needs to be done. That's pretty much the way all artwork goes. You kind of go, all right, there's no reason to get excited until it's here. We'll do what we can once it's here.
Oh,
So
I did it
heck.
on that Saturday, and then they
Dang.
left Sunday morning, and then they drove it up to Monterey and back. Yeah, it
Wow.
was amazing. So they put a
That
couple
is
thousand miles on it. So it's outside of my shop now. They brought it back a couple days ago. So I got to scrub it all down and start over. Painters and sometimes artists can be a little bit dramatic. That doesn't help anybody. The people that
no.
are paying you to trust you, to know what you're doing, be a professional. Just, hey, here's the time frame. Let's figure out how to make this work.
I've definitely
Yeah,
learned like drama and business do
it
not work
serves no
together.
purpose.
Oil and
You know what?
water. Yes.
If you want to rant when you're hanging out with your friends because it's a funny story, that's great. But
Oh
the
yeah,
people
that's
that are
totally
paying
different.
you a lot of money don't want to know that they're a part of this story. Be a
Absolutely.
professional, treat everybody with respect, be
Yes.
kind, because you never know also these random opportunities that all artists get over time where you're like, wow, that one worked me to death. I'll never say yes to that again. Will somehow lead to an even bigger job that you
Yes.
could have never predicted. So you really got to
100%.
stay receptive and open and just be decent with everybody.
Yeah, I totally agree with you, and I think it's important, like when you're working with somebody or a company, like they don't need to know anything about your personal life if you have an excuse of any kind. Like they don't
Excuses
care.
serve no purpose.
Yeah, they
What
don't
is
care.
the answer to the problem we're trying to solve? That's all that
Yes.
matters.
Yes, like
Are we
they are
going to get
hiring
there?
you for one thing and one
That's
thing
it.
only.
Stay on topic. They really, if they ask personal questions, that's wonderful. They want to get to
Oh,
know
of
you, be
course,
friends,
yeah.
but they're hiring you to do a job. So let's
Yeah.
stay on task.
Yeah, I think a lot of artists kind of lose sight of the business side of it. Yes, it's art, but it's also just it's a job. Cut and dry. They're paying you for a service. That's just what it boils down to, and they don't need to know all of the other things
Yeah.
happening. I totally get that. So when the art car comes, oh, well, it's there at your shop. So you do the art on it, like the Sharpie art, and then you hire a team to help you put it all back together and clear it, or is that a one-man band?
Usually in the past, I've done the entire process myself from the
Yes.
disassembly, the prep, the final clear. And I decided on this one, I could have done it that way, but I don't know if it's just getting older or what. But I was like, you know what? I don't need to do all of this. And I can I've got friends that are professionals in all these other areas. If I can
Right.
bring them in, then we can all be a part of this. That's great. Everybody gets paid for the jobs they do. Because ultimately, I think when you're younger, it's easy to be like, yeah, I want to do everything and I want to take credit for everything, but it actually doesn't serve any other purpose except burning more of your time. So in my mind, the very like super logical art person side of me goes, as soon as I'm done with the artwork and I can pay a shop whatever they want, it doesn't even matter to me, whatever they want to clear coat and polish this car, while they're doing that, I'm back at my shop working on the next painting
The
because
next
that's
thing,
what
yes.
I want to do.
I'm very much in the same position as far as creating the artwork on the canvas and then taking it to one of my friends who does the automotive refinishing and he
Oh,
does like
wow.
body work and things like that. And he will take the canvas and scuff it and clear it for me. And he keeps saying like, "Oh, I can teach you how to do this." And I was like, "I
Yeah.
would love to know how to do that, but honestly, it is such a dream to be able to drop these canvases off and know that they're going to be cared
Yeah, that's
for and
amazing.
done." Yes, it's the best feeling. You can go and pick up them when they're done and then his story is part of the artwork as well. And so
That's
it's
true.
it's a cool team collaboration that we have going on.
And the other thing is on the other side, I used to paint cars and I think that I was good, but that doesn't mean that I'm the best. He does it every day. I'm not going to be better than
Absolutely.
him. Let's just
Yes.
let the professionals do what they do. Well, it's not a competition. We all have the same goal at the end of the day. I
Yes.
want the customer to be stoked on this car. And there's parts that I want to be responsible for, and there's parts that I want somebody with more experience to be responsible for.
Absolutely. And so talking about the Sharpie car and everything, like a lot of the things I read, that's kind of what got you into that space of doing art cars was the two Sharpie cars that you did.
Yeah.
Were you sponsored by Sharpie, the marker company, or how did that even come to fruition, those two cars?
I was originally, well, not originally, I was when we moved to California, I started doing artwork more full time.
Okay.
Because when I started doing artwork more full time, I was primarily doing graffiti. I hadn't even really
Oh,
mixed in
wow.
car artwork at the time. The two art cars that really blew up things for me at the beginning were actually done in Maryland. They're before I even moved to California.
Wow. I
Actually, there was
didn't know
three.
that.
So the Mustang, the Camaro, and then the Pro
The,
Street Camaro. All those
yeah,
were
the Pro
Maryland
Street, yeah.
cars. So those were all like the Pro Street was the last thing that I did before we moved to California. And that was kind of when the blog kind of still had steam. So there was still some steam behind it when we left,
Mhm.
and it was hard to drum up interest for that kind of thing. But there was also leverage to use there. Tons of photos, lots of process, lots of things to kind of explain to people because it was sort of a new world at that time. I wasn't the only person doing Sharpie cars, that's for
Yeah,
sure. But I might have been the person sharing it the most at the time because I
right.
wasn't afraid to share the process and the steps. Those few cars really landed a lot of focus for me, although it's a lot different to what I do now for work, but still art and cars, eventually they all kind of go hand in hand.
They do. And so, what would be your, so we talk about like the most challenging or what brought you the most effort. Is there a project in your career that you feel the most proud of?
Oh, that'd be really hard. Like I said, I do a lot of artwork.
Yeah.
Because I think, especially anybody in any creative field, whether you're like a songwriter, artist, or a musician, or anything like that, I think you're always looking at what the next thing that you're going to do. So what's good right now might not feel as substantial like a couple weeks from now. Not
100%.
not that I want to diminish anything that anyone or myself does right now. I just think I probably spent more time looking forward than back, because I think
Same.
especially artists can get really wrapped up in moments that feel successful, like, oh, I got all this publicity, but you can't live there. That's not permanent. And social media makes the world really, really fleeting. You can enjoy those moments from a point of pride, but you can't fuel yourself forever from there. You got to go, hey, what am I doing next? What am I doing next? You can't stay there. You got to keep going.
Man, that's so, so good. Before we started recording, I asked you if we were cool about talking about faith and God and things
Yeah.
like that. You seem super grounded and you're very positive. What do you attribute that to?
Not wanting to be negative.
So there was a time in your life, do you think that you were negative?
I think so. I think we're like the area that I came from. I'm born and raised just out of Washington, D.C. And I think people come from big metro city areas. It's really easy to be cynical and sarcastic.
Yeah.
And it was a little bit of a culture shock coming to the West Coast when I realized
Yeah.
I was saying things and making jokes that weren't landing. It made me feel like I was kind of mean spirited, but I was like, no, I'm joking. Like my people would understand.
Yeah.
Thought, no, maybe that's not such a good thing to joke that way or be that pointed. I never really thought of myself as much of a negative person, but I think most people can relate. You spend enough time around negative people, you go, wow, I really don't want to be like that.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
you can work backwards and you kind of go, I don't I don't want to have those character traits.
Huh.
And being negative, especially in perspective of work or jobs that seem impossible, they don't help you achieve it. It doesn't really help you achieve anything. It doesn't mean that there aren't stressful points with a painting or working with somebody. That's a roller coaster of life. That's going to happen regardless if you're in a good mood or a bad mood. The waves are going to go the way that they're going to go. I don't really know. I feel strangely optimistic about stuff sometimes, or at least people tell me that. And it doesn't feel that way to me. Because I guess we all live our own lives because
It's all relative. Yeah, it's all
it
relative.
is because I find what I do to be plenty stressful. Don't worry. I'm definitely like, wow, this is really hard. And that's okay. Yeah, I just never found any value in like being overly critical about stuff. Maybe when I was younger, but I think we all get different with age, and you just kind of see that there's no value in any of that. Like just be a decent person, do cool stuff, be inspirational. I get a lot of artists to send me artwork and drawings on like social media, and my goal is always to find the greatest thing that I can say to keep them inspired to move forward. Just to keep at it. Good and bad is totally relative. I think we're all at different stages of where we're at. Some people are closer to the beginning, some people are closer to the middle. Who has the power to tell somebody, hey, you should get off the train here? That's ridiculous. You have no idea what's on the other side of somebody's talent. So I've never thought it would be beneficial to tell anybody, maybe this isn't for you. Like that's an awful thing to say. You want to be able to push people as far forward as they can, because I know from experience that the people that have helped kind of be like a glimmer of light, it has so much more weight than the opposite. And we all remember the negative things that people like our friends or family had ever said. But somebody that had something really nice to say, man, that makes your whole day. Like that makes the biggest difference of all.
Being an artist, I'm sure you've heard the term constructive criticism. Do you find that a necessary evil in your practice?
Only when it's asked for. Yeah,
Interesting.
I think social media makes people really comfortable with giving you feedback when you haven't asked for it.
Yes.
And again, that's just kind of the world we live in. So you have to roll with it. You can't let it hurt you, because it's going to happen regardless of whether you ask for it or not. The difference is if you follow an artist or you have a close friend or family member and you're asking them what they think, you should value that opinion because it's somebody that you value in general. If we take all the criticism that we get from social media and use that to change who we are and what our artwork is about, there's nothing left of us at the end of the day. If you draw terribly, maybe that's your style. Maybe it's not terrible. Maybe it's this really unique thing that you do. Maybe it's the way that you see the world that nobody else does. Maybe nobody gets it yet, maybe that's all. Maybe you just haven't found the people that understand that you have this weird idea and everybody else is coming at it from a more analytical point of view, and maybe you're more an abstract person. You just haven't found the people that see what you're seeing.
Okay, that is cool. I love that. That's a great statement.
The barrier for entry is very low. It's measured almost entirely by effort. Quality of what you do does play a role, but effort is everything. How you spend time doing it. 15 years ago, the job that we have now is made up. It's just non-existent. There's no college course for this. There's no, you want to draw cars for a living? Okay, interesting. Good luck.
Yes, that's so true. And I was going to ask you what your biggest trait you feel has played into the success of your business, like a personality trait. Perseverance.
Always. Yeah.
Awesome.
Push through. I usually work on a painting between 1 to 3 days to give myself kind of a really specific window to work. I haven't decided if it's good or bad until almost the end. If I can't see it all the way through, I haven't really seen what the potential is. It might actually be terrible in the end. But I also realize that the way that I paint, the majority of it comes together at the very end.
Yes.
So if you're really stressed about that 80% of the process and that you don't get to the end where it's actually good, you're never going to see the good part if you can't get through all these bad parts. So perseverance is everything. You really do have to push through.
Yeah, and you'll have a miserable quality of life if you're stuck in that 80% and not able to like see that hopeful end. Because I think in every painting or every creative venture, there is that moment where you're in the pits and you're like, this is terrible. Why did I start this? This looks terrible. And then you get to the end and you're like, wow, I cannot believe I created this. This is beautiful. This is exactly what I had in my head, or it's better than what I had in my head. So like if you live in that 80% of the process of where you're kind of just like wondering if it's going to work and you don't persevere through the end, you're missing out on that final step where you're like, holy crap, this is cool.
Yeah. And I hope that I haven't played a role in this, but I understand how on social media, especially with artists, we see the majority of the beautiful artwork people do, and we assume that there aren't any issues, any flaws, and it's beautiful from beginning to end, which is part of why I like to share the really awful parts in the beginning, just to understand that there's a whole process and journey in there. Completely can understand how social media slants the idea of over perfection all the way through. Mm-hmm. And everybody, I hope, realizes that just isn't really the way it goes. Paintings can look pretty bad from the beginning, or they can look amazing, or they can get thrown away and broken in half. Like it happens all the time.
There's a lot of your videos that pop up on my feed that are basically you pouring paint over an old painting. And I've always wondered like what the stories are behind the old painting. Because I've maybe once or twice I can think of painted over an old painting, mostly because I just ran out of canvas and I needed something else to paint on. But what are the stories behind those paintings?
If a painting is just going awful, I break the canvas in half and I destroy it because I need it to be completely dead and gone. I don't want to keep trying to make life out of something that is trying to kill me. So I kill those canvases, they go away. I start over. Painting over old canvases, if something hasn't sold, I will paint over it, maybe a month or 2 months. If I feel like the window of time where this going to be a potential sale has passed, and I happen to want to work on that size canvas, I can save myself a trip to the store and just paint over it. I've gotten the criticism in the past, hey, why didn't you tell me you were going to paint over that? You could have just shipped it to me. No, I would rather burn a canvas than give it away to somebody unwittingly. If it was like friend, family, somebody that I've sold to, that's a different story. I'm not saying that I wouldn't pass along this artwork. But when people go, hey, you could have done that for a discounted rate, that's not how I do anything. If I'm going to make a deal on a painting for somebody, it's going to be somebody that's bought from me, like a good customer, close friend, somebody that's come by the shop that's like, hey, what are you doing with that? And I'm not doing anything with it. By the time I've made the decision to paint over something, I've exhausted all those possibilities already.
Yes.
And I'm committing to this. Yeah, it's kind of funny, the idea of people going, oh, you could have put these on like a discount rack. And I
didn't even think about that.
No, it sets up the same problem that I've had from the beginning. If you give people the path of least resistance, they will wait until there's something cheaper available.
Yes. You're saying you're making a painting in 3 days. What are the typical sizes you work on?
Actually, it doesn't matter. The bigger, the better. I find that bigger paintings are a little bit easier to do than smaller paintings. So the smallest I like to paint is 16 by 20. 18 by 24 is about average. 24 or 36 from there. Okay. From that size, I'll usually just roll canvas on a wall.
You're in your studio now, and is that a Ferrari behind you?
Yeah.
Is that your Ferrari?
Yeah, that's my Ferrari, and it's next to my Ducati.
Very cool. So when did you purchase your first? Is that your first Ferrari that you've ever?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Was that like an insane day?
It was pretty amazing. Yeah,
Do
it's
you
like
mind
childhood
sharing?
dream come true. Yeah.
Yeah,
Like, cause
okay.
I had to go to North Carolina to check it out and I had it shipped here. But it
That's
was after I'd finished a really big job and I was like, this is perfect. Because I can finally buy one of my childhood dream cars. I've had a bunch of different cars, but this is the one that I keep inside. So this is also where I do my artwork. So I like to have the cars and motorcycles inside with me. It's always good inspiration.
I just feel like that's like a day that a lot of people, myself included, that, it's like a dream that you've realized, whether it's a Ferrari or whatever your dream is. I think
Yeah.
that's so cool that you can reward yourself in that way with what you do for a living.
It's
That's
hard to
cool.
go for a drive in something like this. Whatever your aspiration car is, it changes any bad day into a great day. Something that has that power is like you never get tired of it. You never really get bored of it. And I think it sets up a really interesting problem. When you've achieved a dream that you thought was impossible, you don't really know what to do next because in your mind, young you has set the bar so high that you don't know what to do next. And I fear, and I fell into this trap a little bit, and then I was like, I got grounded pretty quick. It's because of social media. It's very easy to feel like we need to hustle more, we need to push more, we need to work more.
Yes.
All right, I got this. Now I got to get the next car or I got to get a bigger house. I'm so interested. It doesn't seem like I'd be a minimalist person with the kind of cars that I've got. I want the least amount of stuff that has the most amount of purpose. These are all very focused things that I have that do something specific. There's nothing that I have that's meaningless. If I have something that sits for too long, it's time to sell it and let it go because it's no longer doing anything except costing money. I think it's easy to get wrapped up in that value of the things that I own show people where I'm at in life, especially coming from the car culture world, especially in Southern California. I get it. You got to be you at the core all the time. The example I always give, I don't go to a lot of cars and coffee primarily because I meet a lot of people with expensive cars that the most interesting thing about them is the car. And that's really dull and really, really boring. So I don't really want to go and hang out with people like that. I don't hang out with Ferrari people. I don't hang out with Porsche people. I know people that own them and they're great people, but we don't meet up together and go on these drives and talk about our cars. I'm not really interested in that. I bought these things for me as a celebration, as really specific moments in life, because they're important to me. And I think it's really easy to get possessive about stuff and kind of go, I've achieved this great thing, so I need to show other people that I have. Like, that says something. There's something else out of line in personality. The external validation, I think all artists love that to some degree.
Oh yeah, yeah.
But for me, that's selling the artwork and getting the views. That's I don't care if anyone sees me in a bright red car. That doesn't make any difference to me. That's for me. I want the focus to be on the artwork always.
Wow, that's so cool. Thank you for sharing that. I think that's a cool perspective on like rewarding yourself. I think you're right. Like we kind of move on to the next thing so quickly. And I got a habit of doing that where I reach a goal and then I'm like, okay, check that off the list onto the next, and I almost forget to sit
You
down
gotta stay in that
and
moment
realize
longer.
it. Yeah, you do. Life is short, life is so
Life
short.
is really short. It's part of why I rarely cover the stuff in here, even though it'll get dusty. I want to see it every day.
Heck yes, I totally agree with you. And I think that's so, so cool to prioritize your personality, your hobbies, your interests over your material things. And I think honestly, that's why I love vintage cars is because they come with story already.
Always a story. Yeah, you're
You know?
totally right. But I agree. If there's a way that you can kind of extend that moment for as infinity as it can be, if there comes a point where I'm like, okay, this thing or this other thing doesn't no longer brings me that joy, that's okay. You go, all right, it's time to move on to the next thing. But the cars that I have, when I tell people about them, I just call them by color. I don't say what they are because it's not important to me for anyone to know what they are. I'm taking the red car, I'm taking the blue car, I'm taking the gray car, because it doesn't matter, because the joy is for me. If I'm getting joy out of other people from my material things, that says that there's something for me that I need to work on. Like maybe I'm not, something else isn't getting satisfied somewhere else. Something in life is out of balance. If I'm getting too many pats on the back for the bike that I arrive on or something. I mean, we all like attention. It's that delicate balance of, do I own this because people like me because I have it? Or do I own this because this really means something to me?
It brings you joy.
And it's totally different.
Yeah, it provides a quality of life that you want. Wrapping this up here, I do want to ask you one last question. Obviously, we have a lot of different creative people that are going to be listening to this, but I always like to ask if there's a single piece of advice or something that you want to like tell your younger self as starting your business.
That's a great question. I think even if it were my younger self or even kind of the artists I think that are early on in their journey that I know, is there's a lot of stick-to-itiveness. I think it's really, really important. See it through, but also define what your limits are. Find, pick a line where you go, this is too much for me, because there's nothing wrong with saying I could go back to a normal job. You can prove something to yourself, but if it's going to kill you to do it, it's actually not worth it. If the journey to doing what you want to do forces you to lose the love for what you do, that's a sign. So at every intersection point, while you're checking in, make sure, am I steering myself in a direction where I still love what I do? Because at least for me, my goal is for this not to feel like a job. It is at the core, there's still plenty of work to do every single day. But if it feels like a job, then I feel like I might as well go get a real job, because then I'll get paid every week and the same amount of money. There'll be some consistency to it that's worth it. Expect that there's always going to be work to do, and find the joy in every stage of that process, even when it's stressful.
Yes.
Because if it wears you out to the point where you don't find the joy in, especially something creative, it starts to show in your work. And that's a net loss. You start 100%. To diminish in the quality of everything that you do.
Yes.
Because you never want to do creative stuff passively. You always get passive results.
That's such a solid point. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's so incredible. Well, let people know where they can find your artwork and how they can contact you if they're interested in your work.
Easiest place is Instagram. I'm pinstripe_Chris. And website is artofchrisdunlop.com. I think I'm Pinstripe Chris on Facebook as well. And that's it.
Thank you so much for being here with me tonight and just being vulnerable, sharing your advice, your insights on things. It's just, I know this is going to really help a lot of people. It's definitely helped me.
Oh, that's amazing. Thank you.
Thank you, Chris.
Thank you for listening to The Curated Craftsmen. You can support this podcast on Patreon. If you were inspired by this conversation, please leave a review, share the show, and subscribe.